Our agenda. After our opportunity for public comment, we will review and approve the minutes of our last meeting. We will then review the detailed design, site design process, the classroom wing breakout space design, and we'll get some project updates on the geothermal road prep, which will require a vote from us, some general project and permitting updates, and then hoping to wrap up as close to 8 o'clock as we possibly can. So, first item on the agenda is reviewing and approving the minutes of our last meeting on January 16th. Are there any questions or edits to those minutes? Okay, hearing none, I would seek a motion to approve the minutes of January 16th.
I move the minutes of January 16th as written.
Okay, motion by Mike, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I heard Jagroot first, so second by Jagroot. Bill Flannery, a member of the committee, is joining this meeting remotely, so we will be doing a roll call vote. So we'll start with Jagroot.
Yes.
Tiffany?
Just gonna abstain, I wasn't at the meeting.
Right. Mike?
Yes, sir.
Nancy?
I'm gonna have Amanda vote because she was
Okay.
here.
Amanda?
Aye.
Bill?
Yes.
And I am a yes, so
501.
501. You're ahead of me. I was trying to help. Okay, so that takes care of our admin. Oh, sorry, I should have mentioned, there is no one in the room currently for public comment and no one on the Zoom for public comment.
Correct.
So if a member of the public does come and would like to comment, we'll entertain the possibility of opening it back up. But now I will go to our site design progress update, and I'm guessing I'm turning this over to Dan?
Over to Ashley.
Yes.
Ashley, okay.
How best, thank you all so much for having me. It's great to be here. How best can I present this?
I don't know.
I'm trying to launch my meeting right
You
now.
can just guess where you're at.
Should show.
We can't, I could join the Zoom and.
I'm gonna
share
join
on
my the Zoom right now, I think. If someone left, is anyone in the Zoom?
Yes.
Yes, we got a couple of people on the Zoom. But I don't think that monitor is
Pretty
in the
neat
Zoom.
stuff.
So that's what she was saying she was having technical difficulty with, was getting the
Yeah,
Zoom
she
on the
can't get the
monitor.
Zoom on the TV.
Well, we all,
Get
does everybody have
Yeah.
access to the presentation on their machine?
The slides?
So why
Yeah.
don't we get rid of the Zoom on the TV, because you can hear the audio if somebody has a question, but no, you don't need to see anybody on the Zoom.
Then the public can see the presentation if it goes up.
presentation.
Right, there you go.
Okay.
So I'd say dump the Zoom off the monitors.
Okay.
So we were saying, let's just.
So can I share my screen? Will that work for everybody? And everyone will be able to see it?
Well, we don't have the Zoom up there, so I think what we're gonna do is, if we can switch over, Chris's laptop is plugged in, so then he can drive the slides.
Got it.
Or she could.
If you share the Zoom, or share it on Zoom, though, Bill can see it.
Great, got it.
Oh, good point.
Public comment now? No, Ashley is,
So Chris, use your flip seat.
I'm just trying to jump on the Zoom.
Ashley.
I think I'm sharing it right now, actually. It should be popping up.
Yeah,
Have it on the Zoom.
Carol has it on the Zoom.
What we're gonna do is, if we can switch over, Chris's laptop is plugged in, so
It's a little
delay.
Something we didn't do.
Yeah.
Or share it on Zoom, no, Bill can see it.
we can bless the public on HCAM if we don't. So yeah, I mean, I'm gonna pull it.
I'm just trying to jump up.
So can I share my screen? I think I'm sharing it right now, actually. It should be popping up.
Yeah.
Carol has it.
My only problem with doing that now is I won't, if you hear Bill, that's fine. I just won't.
Okay,
Okay.
I think I can hear people. Okay, great. So everyone can see my screen, hopefully. So today, I'm just hoping to present an overview of where we are. The site plan overall, in terms of layout, really hasn't changed that much. What we've been doing over the last, I'd say, 6 months is really starting to refine some of the geometry of the roadways, the parking, drop-offs, and then starting to dive in much greater detail into the outdoor classroom spaces as well as resource areas. where we've been meeting with user groups to get initial findings in terms of what sort of program elements need to be incorporated. But then after that, and more importantly, starting to present some schemes and then come back and refine them. So what you're seeing today is a couple levels of refinement that we've run through the working group. So just pointing on the screen, you still have your PE fields up here in your top left. You see your overflow parking, your emergency roadway wrapping around those PE fields. You still have your bus loop located to the front of the school. Your parent loop wraps the back of the school. That will be planned to be closed during the day, which is important when you start to look at some of the graphics for the play area. Recess behind with the specific resource fields, outdoor classrooms in those courtyard spaces, service, and then again the bus loop in the front. We are continuing to refine some of the geometry of the connections, specifically connection to Marathon, the roundabout geometry, as well as some of the connections with the parking lot. So our traffic engineer, Vinod from BHB, is working with that, and you'll continue to see those as we go. So the next update here is about the playgrounds. So the graphic you see here is a 3D bird's eye of what that recess space will look like. So similar to what everyone saw in the last rendition, we have this central 150 by 100 foot field, and then you have a north play area and then a south play area. So in the upper play area, you have a full basketball court, you have swings, you have play structures, and then something similar in the south play area. However, you have a smaller half court, maybe geared to some smaller kids, again, some seating, some play areas, swings. And then that emergency road, I think this gives you a nice view of what that could be, because in essence, when the roadway is closed during the day, all of this becomes play. So you just have complete play across the entire back of the school, which is fantastic. This is a view of that north play area. Oh, perfect. So you have your full basketball court. You can see we have swings, we have climbers, what we call an agility trail, which I think is really fun. It works on building strength, but it's also like an obstacle course for the kids, spinners. All the play equipment will have a percentage of ADA accessible equipment to accommodate. Some other views, view looking south towards the field, so you just get a nice feel for that scale. And then view to the east. We are trying to incorporate some trees within that play area. Some of the feedback we always get across the board is the need for shade, no matter where you are, and sometimes these play areas can get really hot. View from the basketball court, and then the view from the school. Please stop me if anyone has any questions on what these are looking like. And then again, this gives you a great feel for the scale. So this is the view if you're standing in the middle of that field looking back towards the school. That's what you'll see there. And then again, view north looking towards that basketball court. And then moving to south play area. So you can already feel how this playground in itself can be, we understand there'll be like upwards of 200 students there, but it can be broken down however staff needs it to be. It could be 2 separate areas, it could be 3, and the field could even be divided in 2, which is why we're starting to suggest 2 goals, just so you can get a feel for that. Yeah, again, so spinners, swings, we heard across the board, people love swings, we have a lot of swings in all of these. A seating group, because we do understand some students just like to hang out and relax. There's a walking loop around the entire play area, which is actually a 1/4 mile, and I think a really nice resource. And then across the street, you start to see the bioretention area, which is a storm management intervention, but I think we can start to incorporate that into the learning aspect of the school. And then you'll also start to see the connections to the crosswalks in the outdoor classrooms. So again, view from the school, view from the fields, some of the outdoor seating, and the view, this view to the right here is you're looking north, up that emergency drive lane, so you see your playgrounds to the right and the outdoor classrooms to the left. Any questions before we jump on the recess spaces?
So what is the surface?
So, let me switch back. So the surface in general, the fields will be a grass field, and then we're proposing rubber play surfacing for those play areas. You know, there's other alternatives like artificial turf you could use too, but since we have that large like grass space in the middle, it feels like the break of materials will actually be really nice. And then the pathway around will be concrete. And then you can see tons of opportunities for games on that roadway too. Moving to the outdoor classrooms, we still have 3 outdoor classrooms of varying scale. There's 1 smaller outdoor classroom, and then we have 2 larger spaces. We are starting to look at theming, maybe based on some of the natural resources of Hopkinton, so looking at ecological resources like meadows, forest, marsh, pieces that we can incorporate into the site design really subtly, and start to really ground it into Hopkinton and engage with some of the programming of the actual school. So upper right here is the view into the first courtyard, and then the lower image is the view into that second courtyard right here where it says forest, and you see that outdoor classroom space. This is the largest outdoor classroom, and what's great about this, it's really naturally inspired by some of these elements that you'd see in a forest, but what I love is that you have 2 rings, so the interior space could function for one classroom, but then when you have larger groups, you can start to spill out into those exterior spaces around the edge. So you could accommodate upwards of 40 students easily with this space. And then on off hours, picnic tables just can be used all the time too. But very natural inspired materials, picnic tables, really, really durable, really flexible. This is a view of another outdoor classroom. This is the other courtyard, the lower courtyard. Again, inspired by some of the rock formations that you see in Cameron Woods, actually, is where that photo was taken from. A really more natural looking outdoor classroom, but you have the boulder seating around. There's a great space for presentation in the middle. And then this one can accommodate upwards of 30 kids again. And it really knits in well, I think, with the courtyard space. So it can be used as outdoor classroom, it kind of uses play, and it can be broken down into many different areas for use by 2 kids or 30. And again, trees lining those walkways. As you look at the outdoor classrooms, we have strategically located the classroom spaces for the outdoor classroom away from the wings. So you'll see they're pulled a little bit forward and away from that so that you have some privacy and, you know, protection from sound and noise. And then this is just a view looking south of what you would see with the walkways around the school as well as your view to the outdoor classroom. So any questions I can answer, and I can pull up this image too. Any thoughts, questions, recess, outdoor classrooms, next steps?
With the rock formations, you know, being this is New England, there's many fieldstone walls at this site. Are you envisioning using reclaimed boulders from the site, or purpose-specified rocks, or fake rocks, or? what
Well,
are you
if we
envisioning?
find great boulders that are really softer around the edges and not hard edged, then yes, we would definitely love to use those. If we can't, we'll just specify them.
There'll be plenty of boulders.
There's plenty of
Yeah,
boulders.
but that would be great, because then, you know, it's just another reference point.
I mean, essentially, when we built the law school here, we brought in an entire rock crushing operation to reuse all the gravel on site, so there'll be no shortage of rocks.
So that's perfect. Yeah, and you'll just note that everything in there just really, really durable materials. You're not gonna break the rocks, the picnic tables, you're not gonna do anything to them. So, I think it's gonna last a really long time.
I don't have a question, but I would just say 2 things. One, it's really nice to see particularly these spaces start to come to life, because probably disproportionate to their point in the budget, these were a very much a discussion topic throughout the initial phases of this project. And hopefully what people in the public can see is obviously the utility of them, not just as classrooms, but also just as, you know, creative spaces where the kids can, you know, are able to get outside and experience the school a little differently. And the other thing I notice in some, and I know this is conceptual landscaping, but it's nice to see it up against the building, because I think all of us are, you know, the size of the building for it being an elementary school is something we're particularly sensitive to, but you can see how the landscaping can really break it up and not make it feel, even when you're up against the building, like it's a large, intimidating structure. So I think this is really exciting to see. Are you looking for any feedback specifically, or just?
Only if you have feedback. We're gonna continue to refine, so we're in DDs right now, so I assume we're gonna keep pushing away to clean up these spaces. I think our next big pieces are making sure we get that geometry of those connectors, specifically the roadway connectors nailed down. So that'll be our next piece, but, you know, we're gonna keep moving forward with these designs and just adding the next level of detail to them.
Great,
Great.
thank you.
Okay, I will stop sharing.
Oh, and look, there's Bill.
There's, oh,
Who's that old guy? He didn't hear that.
The only problem I have here is that I am not admitted to the Zoom yet. So I can't share what I'm displaying.
I just admitted you.
Oh, there we go.
There you go. I didn't know you
You have
actually
to
had
say
to, but-
please, Chris, come on.
Sounds good. Well, thank you, everybody, for having me. I hope to
great.
see you back soon.
See you.
Thank you. It'd be nice if the trees were really that big.
I know.
Hey, while Chris is pulling that up,
Trying to pull that up.
so tonight I have Peter Romaines with me, who's working closely with Bob on the design portions of the project. Bob, as you know, is away in Canada this week, having a much-needed break with his family. So Peter's here to fill in, and I have a suspicion you'll see more of Peter as we keep going forward.
Good.
Just wanted to give an introduction to Peter so that you know who's going to be presenting to you this next topic, which is the classroom wing breakout space design. I think you got it.
I think I finally got it.
All right.
There we go.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for having us. Again, I'm Peter, and today I'm just going to talk a little bit about our thinking and our process regarding some development within the school itself. Particularly tonight, we're talking about the academic wings, the classroom spaces, and how those interact and have a relationship with the breakout space, which is a flexible learning space that we feel helps and enhances the learning experience. And so there's just a plan of where we landed at the end of SD. Basically, the way that we set up the classroom wings is that the breakout space is centralized, and the classrooms in the middle push out on both sides of the wing to allow that space to happen. But we also wanted to look a little bit deeper about how we might configure this space as it fits the needs of the school, and also these concepts of open versus enclosed, one large space versus scaled smaller breakout spaces, central or offset. What is going to make a better neighborhood feel for each of these classrooms, and also how can we get some additional daylight into a central space. And so as part of this process, what we did was, and here's just an example of what we're talking about when we say breakout space and flexible learning. This is an example from Zervis, which was on, I believe, the tour of the different schools in Massachusetts. And so we're looking at not just furniture arrangement, but the relationship on visibility into the classrooms, how to maximize daylight coming into this space, and even, some more permanent installations like lockers and how that might define the space as well. Next slide. To delve into this process a little bit more, we took what was kind of a framework of a breakout space in the classrooms, and we looked at several different options. Basically ideas that would either shift that breakout space to one side, try to reclaim a little bit of daylight coming from the end of the corridor. There was also an idea of, does that breakout space have to be open? Can it also be its own space that can be enclosed and used by a variety of classrooms? But again, it's a more separate space than the circulation. Is it one space? Is it two spaces? Based on the feedback that we got, we narrowed it down to three options. One being sort of a slight modification from what we had started with a central space. One that did, again, look at scaling that into two breakout spaces that creates a little bit more of a neighborhood feel between 4 classrooms and 4 classrooms. And also that fifth option, which again takes some of that square footage that we allotted to the corridor and made a separate space itself. So we took 3 of those ideas and we developed those a little bit further, modeled them, and also added furniture layouts to start really seeing how those moves might impact the functionality of the space. Again, based on more recent feedback, our understanding is that the preferred option is option 1, which again is similar to what we had in SD, but with a few key differences. The first is that we've reduced the number of corners on the building, so we've basically moved the 2 center classrooms on the south portion of the wings up, and we've created a straight edge to then allow a larger offset space of breakout to the north. So we've moved the 2 classrooms in the middle farther north. Instead of 4 feet out, it's 8 feet now. And what this does is a few things. The first is that it creates more of a defined corridor, so you have a very clear circulation path, which can be reinforced with floor materials, ceiling design, lighting design. But it also it gives this sense of having still a central space that can be used by 2 or more different groups. We do have 2 breakout spaces sort of as of right now with 2 marker boards and a furniture arrangement for each of them. But the idea is that every classroom has sort of this connection to this main space. And so it's really trying to reinforce the idea of having a neighborhood community in each of these classroom wings. We'll obviously be studying this a little bit further based on sight lines, as well as how might we be able to design those locker islands, which are the sort of 4 boxes in the middle, to better define those spaces and to make sure that the furniture kind of stays within the zones that are designated flexible learning. And then there's just one more view that shows the same scheme, but just a little bit lower, so you have a better sense of what that does with the classrooms, which basically are the same arrangement as before, a few modifications with where the doors are placed, obviously on the north with those 45-degree chamfers. But the idea is that we're going to move forward with the scheme unless there's any other feedback you have today.
I'm absolutely comfortable with this option 1, but it's more important to me that the actual people that are going to use it are more comfortable. So I would defer to the
course.
users as to what they want. But this bump out, this is the northernmost wing.
Yes.
Would the center wing look exactly the same?
Yep.
It would bump out to the north.
Correct. We would do
And
all
the
3.
the
Yep.
southern wing would bump out to the north. My concern, of course, about that is if you bumped it out the other way on the southern wing, it would actually make the building closer to the abutters than what we told them it's going to be. So if they all bump out to the north, that would, from my perspective, that would be great.
Noted.
I had a question. In the current footprint picture, you had showed like a locker system with like a tabletop. And then when I scroll down, I also see that there's kind of like it almost looks like those high top tables. Is that assuming that those locker systems will be in this breakout space like you showed in the current footprint picture?
Yeah, the idea is that we would have both the sort of traditional lockers against walls, and so we're trying to keep that on one side, on the south side of the corridor. We do have to do a locker count to ensure that we have enough, but we feel like the 2-tier locker system is going to get us that amount. But yes, we are planning to potentially have some of those sort of single-tier lockers as defining elements within those flexible learning spaces. That is the photo,
It's
yeah.
kind
that's
of
the-
critical.
Can I keep asking? I wasn't done yet.
Go ahead,
Can I
keep
keep
asking.
going? I'm curious to know like, the benefits and the drawback of having something kind of stationed there that is inflexible in its ability to be moved. I think in some of the experience I've seen in other buildings, this ends up being a really nice place to have larger neighborhood meetings as well. And so being able to kind of move something out of the way so you could have the whole wing together. Let's say they need to have a community meeting, having something stationary and so large may limit the space in which teachers might want to use it. That's just something I'm wondering about. I don't know the benefit or the drawback necessarily, other than that. And then my secondary question was, the teachers were also interested in option 1. That was their preference.
I think we're supposed to be meeting with them as well, so.
Okay.
So that's going to be a discussion point with them. So I think it's on the table, but it's also similar to what we had presented in SD, and I feel like that kind of a change, we'll discuss it with them for sure.
Yeah, I think option 1 is the preferred option of the ones you showed. That I was just curious about that flat top area being
Yep.
more mobile, so that if more people wanted to be out there, they could, but they could also have it there if it was something mobile to leave it more structured. I also think different hallways may have different neighborhood vibes, so having some option from floor to floor for faculty might be helpful.
She's speaking from a professional teacher perspective.
Does it-
Let me speak from a building inspector perspective and a fire inspector perspective. Part of the problem with having stuff in the hallway and having it mobile, where teachers can move it around, is potentially, not intentionally, they could impair the egress from the building and the safety of the children.
Yes.
So I like the fact that the stationary stuff is there because it kind of makes it, if we're gonna move stuff around, it's gonna be on this side, we still got egress around the other side. As opposed to, you know, what you might think, we'll just move furniture around and kids can walk around the desks and stuff like that. That potentially could be a problem, that's all, I brought it up last week and I'll bring it up again because that's what I do for a
It's
living.
not an unusual, what you're saying is not, it's not that we haven't heard it. It is definitely mentioned almost every
Yeah,
single
I,
time.
and it's one of those things that shows up on the final inspection, and it shows up on the annual inspection.
Yeah, but I have to say, like, I just wonder about, I understand we need lockers and we need enough. So logistically, I can't solve that, but you guys can. So my wonder is, if you just took those out and left the furniture, but we didn't account for lockers in that space, would we just have more flexibility? That's all.
Yeah.
I believe having the furniture that you have placed there looks on point. I agree with it. I just wonder about those kind of intermittent.
It's really about the opportunity to
Yeah,
maximize the
that's all.
space for
I just don't want to
flexible
limit
uses.
this really awesome opportunity.
We've seen multiple strategies that
Yeah.
have been employed to address Mike's concern, whether it be indications on the floor, change in surfaces. There are strategies that can work from that, but I think the the comment is certainly heard. And when the team goes to meet with the teachers, one of the things that we'll discuss is what's the best way to program that space with the larger building configuration issue that Perkins has outlined today.
I have actually, before we even talk about configuring the lockers, so Elmwood doesn't have lockers, right?
It does not. It has
Yeah.
code hooks in classrooms.
So is there, so I was just curious, I mean, I know that Hopkins does, so I know we're bringing the fourth grade in here, but I was just curious in terms of like, from an early elementary perspective, is that something that you often see in this age group, or I don't know if that's been vetted through
Is it
the
necessary?
teacher? Yeah, like, there's
So-
second and third grade, I mean, I'm even looking at some of the, I know that's conceptual, but like,
Yeah.
second graders probably aren't using those upper ones.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I think it's at the Marathon School, we use the kind of open-faced cubbies in the hallways
Yeah.
with the hangers
Yeah.
and,
Yep. Yeah,
so I think this is kind of a natural transition. So I think it's a little bit, not weird, but, you know, you go from Marathon to Elmwood, where you had your cubby, now you're kind of in the classroom with code hooks and I think desk storage. I don't think they have a lot of storage in that space. I don't know what they do with their lunch boxes and all that stuff. So I think this is kind of a natural transition into just a kind of a closed-faced cubby is the way I would look at it.
Would we
We
have?
don't use locks or anything like that on our
Right.
lockers.
Would there be an opportunity to maybe like move some of those cubbies out of the center and back in if we decided to use more of an open featured cubby, like to keep it in the hallways like Marathon? Would that shrink the size of each individual student's space?
If I recall the focus group discussion correctly, the intent was to get classroom student belongings out of the classroom to maximize the space in the classroom.
Yeah.
And so we wanted an itemized storage system, whether it's lockers or cubbies, to be in the corridor. And so I think one of the things that was in our update is that we're planning in late February or early March to do focus groups again, to reconfirm the programming and the configuration with the educators themselves. And so I think that the question of lockers versus cubbies versus an intermediary is really something that we should bring back to them and confirm at that time. But from a conceptual standpoint, the schematic design decision was to take belonging storage out of the classroom and put it in the hallway, in whatever
Yeah, I
form
think
it
that-
takes.
that makes
That makes
sense.
a ton of
But
sense.
Tiffany's point is about, you know, in that particular image, there's hallway lockers in the hallway area. on the, if you go to the aerial view of the option one, essentially the wall that bumps up would get lockers the same as the south wall, so, you know, you just swing it over to the building. If you can stack them, you take up a lot less space and you can
Right.
maximize more of the internal space. If there's a feeling that stacking them is not reachable, right, to the kids at that, especially at the lower grades, they're not gonna get up there. There could be a different configuration on, you know, one floor versus the other two floors. That's a conversation that this committee, you know, steers the designer for. You guys can have whichever configuration you want, or multiple versions, should the educators feel that, you know, they want the second and third floors to have one thing and the first floor have a different. So all options are on the table.
Yeah, the other thing with lockers, or at least in this configuration, is one of the concepts here was that we could do it by wing or by floor. Once we introduce something else, like you say, all right, now I want that to be second grade there, and that's gonna have cubbies versus
Right.
lockers.
Then you-
Now you're, that's gone. So I think that was also part of the thought was, it should all be able to be moved, adapted as you want to adapt it as you move forward.
And I think that, personally, I think that that's a critical component of this, that we not lock in any spaces that are more the second grade space versus the fourth grade space, because we have, one thing Hopkinton has taught us is that we have no idea what the future holds, so. I think, you know, when you talked about the committee, the committee sort of weighing in and guiding you, I personally would come back to what Mike said at the beginning, which is that I'm most interested in the feedback from the users, right, from the faculty and from the principal and certainly from the facilities, it was a change to me to see lockers in there versus the second and third grade, and I want to make sure we properly vet it if the teachers feel like open cubbies is better for that age than lockers. I want to make sure we're not assuming something, so.
To go back to an earlier comment about the number of islands, there is always the option to look at perhaps instead of 4 islands, there's 2 islands.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
maybe those islands, in this configuration, maybe those islands are on the outside, so that one neighborhood of 4, that becomes that kind of wall that creates that neighborhood.
Yeah.
So
And it could also be linear too.
it could, we
Yeah.
could, you know, that's not carved in stone the way that is, but it is, you know, to Mike's point, it really helps to define that space in some way.
Can you speak a little bit about how you see the flow of student traffic? You know, how do students walk through this? Are both sides of the furniture two-way, so to speak, or how do students
I
actually
wish we
get-
had that kind of control.
Well, I mean, kids line up, the teacher lines them up, like, how do we envision them actually navigating it? You know, whether they're going to the end classroom, or, you know, how much, do we have enough space between the lockers and
Yeah.
the walls?
Yeah, I think
to
the,
do
the
two-way?
intent is to funnel them along the
Yeah.
line of the locker and, you know, appropriately with walking paths, so that there's the locker, there's the kind of anti-space in front of it where the kid would naturally be sitting, and then a passing zone behind it. So wherever the fixed furniture gets placed in this configuration would have to account for the zone of passerby, student with locker
That's-
door
that's a
open, so there's not a
code-driven-
bottleneck.
That's a code-driven thing.
Two passersby
Yeah.
or one, like one?
It's basically,
you know,
what we
6
do
feet.
is a code thing.
Yeah.
6 feet.
We'll do over, like, probably 6'2" or something,
Of course.
and, you know, a little bit more. And then have that the same on both sides, and then have that zone in the middle with the furniture, so there were always that passageway, because you never quite know when something's gonna, and you need that, so you always have 2 compliant passageways.
And the
Because you may have
compliant-
kids go past their classroom to get to their locker and then
Yeah.
backtrack to their classroom, so
Yeah.
you always want that two-way traffic.
And the compliant egress paths will set sort of the guardrails for how you make the furniture and stationary object decisions within that space.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions about this?
Looks great.
It's exciting.
Bill, any questions from you? Assuming you can hear us? Okay.
That, I believe, was the tail end of the design presentation for tonight, so bear with me, because during our technical difficulties, I closed the portion of the presentation that comes next, so let me just get that queued up while I
We need like break music.
Elevator music, right?
It's always the extra pressure when you forget to load it up. So we wanted to revisit the geothermal test well and the preparations for the road for accessing the geothermal test well. The intent when we originally discussed this topic was that we had cut a road deep into the woods so that we could do the geothermal test well, and we approved a proposal to do that said test well. Unrelated to the Elmwood project, we also are pursuing geothermal at the Hopkins project, and that, because access is easier, is actually a test well that began today. As part of that planning, we realized after we cut the road that the certain wet areas within the road itself in the woods would be challenging to drive a vehicle through. And we were optimistic that we would get some sustained cold weather during the winter. Unfortunately, that has not been the case. We've been hovering around freezing for much of the winter. And a few weeks ago, we met with the driller and Tim, and we walked and Dan, and we walked the length of the road, and we found that certain areas of the road itself, despite the cold weather at the time, remained standing water. And given that this was previously a farm, there's quite a depth of loam there, and standing water would mean that driving a vehicle over it could be challenging. So we met with John and Mike. I think Mike joined us for the walk as well. And we discussed re-engaging with the contractor who had done the road so that we could provide some additional riprap stone, some large diameter stone, over the areas that were not freezing, so that we could create a drivable surface to get the rig back to the location that we needed to. We circulated a plan of those areas. I walked it with the contractor, and he began that work last week while it was still frozen. He began the work on Wednesday, and he worked through the day on Wednesday into Thursday. And the last 2 hours of Thursday, it had been progressively warming from the frozen temperatures that we had been in to begin to thaw the top few layers of the road. And unfortunately, that thawing created a bit of an issue for us at the road itself. What we found was that as we drove, or as he drove over, and this is over 2 hours, as the ground thaws from the top down, the moisture that's in the road also thaws from the top down, and it hits up against what's still frozen. And it has essentially a pumping effect when you're in loam, and it pushes all that muck and dirt everywhere that the excavator drove, increasingly up into the road. And so what we found was that these were taken that evening, on Thursday evening. Even areas where we had stoned began to just sink into that thawing mud. So as we continued the work, they recognized the problem and they stopped what they were doing. That's why I went out there to meet with them. And Tim was the only one smart enough to wear muck boots, but Tim and I walked almost the full length of the road, and it was really a consistent problem from fairly deep in all the way out. There was one area where they had stoned, and so I have some pictures of what it looked like as of this morning in the daylight, because the light was fading on us. Large areas of just overall water. It was a lot colder this morning when we did this, so you can see even this is just a thin layer of ice. That's about as good as it gets. Where we had spread stone, it did have the intended purpose, but because of the conditions, we weren't able to spread very much stone. And the further you went where we didn't have stone, just the act of driving over it became an issue. And in some places, it was very deep where the tracks had gone in, and it had thawed since that time. And even some areas where we had put stone, the stone itself had just sunk into the dirt. So unfortunately, this has not been successful as we all had wished. We did authorize, acting on Mike and John's direction, we did authorize an overall proposal with the driller that we'd look for the committee to authorize this evening, which was for $9,250, which was intended to make use of the frozen weather that was scheduled, that was expected at the time that the proposal was authorized. But because the weather changed on us in the course of doing the work, at this point, we don't think that this should continue. I checked in with the contractor doing the work, and he's, his sort of sunk cost so far into this is $5,800. And we heard from the driller who, because he's out for Hopkins today, went to the Elmwood site and reviewed the road, and his response to us is that they feel that currently the road would be impassable for a drill rig and that it can't move forward. So for the committee tonight, we sort of have two topics. One would be approval of the up to $92,250 of the proposal that was authorized, and we would only be paying the actual sunk cost. And the second would be to solicit the committee's opinion of the options we have for moving forward. Because we have the test well for Hopkins underway, and it's reasonably in a similar area, we could use the Hopkins data for our current design intents. That would give us a reasonably close data point. That would give us some information that we could use to determine the size of the well field moving forward. Assuming that we're not going to get any more cold enough weather, we could still, more predictions more than a week out can change. We could get a significant freezing spell in late February, early March. That could change it, and we could move forward trying to stone this. I would shy away from that plan just based on what we've seen and sort of the risk involved. We could hold off on trying to do a test well until the summer in hopes that we have a dry summer and the road may become more passable in that dry weather. Or we can table the geothermal well proposal as it's been approved to date and begin a discussion with GZA about what a revised scope of work would be to advise based on the Hopkins test well what we should do for this project, rather than do a test well specifically for this project at this time.
Is there any flexibility with regards to the location of the test well?
The intent of the test well is to serve as the first permanent well. That's one of the reasons that paying for it is an attractive proposition. To put another test well at a closer location is possible, but it would have to be a determination of whether that data is so much more advantageous than the Hopkins data from down the street. And so we'd look to GZA and Perkins Consultants to advise on where they felt that. We haven't had, this has sort of all come together very quickly over the last few days, and we didn't hear from the driller until about 2 hours ago.
So in short, so if the proposal is to put it in the permanent location, you get the value of the well. You can do what we call a throwaway cost and put it somewhere else on the site. But given that we're drilling one across the street, that's probably going to give you a similar amount of data than drilling it, say, closer to Marathon where you have access, but it would not be in a usable location to connect to the other wells.
You're just not, right now, from what we're seeing and what we're being told by the driller and what everyone's experiencing, any well we put here is just not gonna be nearly close enough. It's gonna cost way too much money to pipe all the way out to wherever this other well is and all the way back. It's probably either right now they're saying they would put a test well, but they're gonna put it right at the edge where Marathon is, right at the edge of the road. They're not even willing to go into the road at this point, having seen it today. And their original idea was to knock off the one in Hopkins and take that rig and drive right over here, provided the weather was good, and drive right in here and drill this one. And now they can't do that. So I think even the putting this off till later idea is probably not that great either, because we can't, even if it's frozen for a week, this guy's not gonna get in his rig and come out here right then and there, so
No, I think the putting it off to later is only towards the summer,
When it-
assuming you had a
hopefully
dry
it's
summer
dry,
like
yeah.
last year,
Yeah.
not
I
a
don't
wet
think we have
summer like the year
another
before,
freeze.
right? So it's just too far of a road to waste the money touching it up constantly to get a rig out there.
Well, would it be cheaper for us to hire some geological expertise that could come up with an opinion that the Hopkins well would be close enough, rather than just speculating that it's close
Well,
enough?
we kind of
Kind
have
of own
that.
that, yeah.
That's what you're
so
gonna ask GZA to do?
Yeah,
GZA's been
We have
contacted.
that.
Yeah.
So as part of the test well cost, it was round numbers, 50,000 to drill the well and 8,000 for the engineer to evaluate it and come up with a report. That engineer can still write the report and make assumptions based on the Hopkins well.
I think that probably is the lesser of 27 evils here.
Right. The only goal of all of this with the well was to try and dial in the
Sure.
specificity of your site so that you could reduce the overall quantity of well and ultimately save more money. This just means you're gonna carry a more conservative number because you're, X hundred yards away versus being right
But-
over the.
A more conservative number than it would be if we were drilling on site. But I would imagine a significantly less conservative number than if we use the data we currently have, which does not include a well
Right.
a football field
It's not
away from.
based-
Right, the engineers to date have done it
Yeah.
based on best practices in New
Right.
England as a whole.
Like-
Right
like I-
now, we're within a dart's throw.
Way out of my domain expertise here, but like, it doesn't seem like the difference should be that significant between the two locations, given how close they are.
They vary, I mean, you can have any type, just look around at ledge, you see ledge crop up all
Yeah.
over the place, there are variants, but to your
But in that
point,
way, it
it's
could vary
very
within the
close.
field. Like yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna get some good, since this drilling was done, we'll have some good idea of what they hit when they did this. Cause there is a lot of ledge over at the Hopkins site. But I don't know what's going on back by where we put this well. I mean, if that's more akin to what this is, you're probably gonna get pretty close data.
If we use the data from the Hopkins site and assume that it was gonna be pretty close to this, at some point, these monkeys are gonna go out there and start drilling wells at the place we want them to drill them. After the road's in,
Yep.
they can get in there easily. Once they drill the first one, then they have concrete data at that point. Is it too late then to change the?
No,
We
probably.
could,
Well, then-
we could talk to,
as a
we could talk to the
universe.
contractor, or talk to the engineer about the option to add additional wells or remove wells.
I
based
think
on
that's
input,
absolutely important. I think that, because once they drill that first one out behind the school, the place we want them, we'll have a much better idea that either we need more or we can get away with less.
Yeah.
Based upon the Hopkins data. I think, that from a financial perspective, the weather is something you can't, you just can't depend on it. I think that might be the best perspective for.
No, I think it makes
going
sense.
forward.
And, being on the conservative side always leaves room for your eventual addition, right,
Yeah.
down the road, so.
Yeah.
Having an extra well or two, will give you some more capacity.
Did we do any borings at the Marathon School that we could use any of that data?
It's different type of borings, cause those ones are going down 25 feet, this is
Yeah.
going down 600 feet,
600,
yeah.
Yeah, you gotta run a lateral, they
Yeah.
put a unit out there. and they
Yeah, it
can
needs
really
the apparatus in
Yeah.
order to
Yeah.
get the data.
Get the data, yeah.
But we didn't hit a lot of ledge there, we hit a lot of boulders,
Boulders,
in the top, 15 feet.
Yeah, one of the benefits of having a boring or a test loop at the borefield location is, in addition to the thermal properties of the ground, it also tells you where the bedrock is. It tells you how much dewatering would be needed, if there's any water flowing into the wells when they drill. So that kind of information is contractors would like to know that in advance, so that they know what their risks are. So from that perspective, I see a benefit in having a loop. at the bore field. But again, I'll defer to GZA, see what their thoughts are, but what I'd like to just emphasize is it's not just the thermal properties of the ground, you also want to know where the bedrock is and how much groundwater to expect.
So maybe it's kind of a dual approach, right? Like, so maybe we're not waiting for the road to go in, but we'll do our calculations based on the Hopkins well. And then if the summer ends up being dry and we think we can get somebody in there, if it's a road we're gonna use anyway, then maybe we can still hire that
Yeah.
company to come out and do that and kind of refine those results for us.
I mean, we don't have, we still have, the money is set aside and it's in the contract now to do it. So, I mean, I think essentially we just leave it and we could continue on with the Hopkins well, and at some point if if the,
If it all
weather
dries
shines
out.
upon us,
Yeah.
then we can revisit it.
No, that makes
The thermal properties may not vary too much, but it's really the bedrock and how much, because the bedrock will dictate how much casing is needed, which is one of the major costs of the bore field, so. And I heard that there's geothermal at the library as well, so there might be other data around
I
the
think
site.
they were open, yeah, they were an open loop, so they were more reliant on pumping water out of the ground.
Okay.
Any other questions? So what do you need from us?
So,
So we,
go ahead, Jeff.
so we need to authorize the cost at least to go, the sunk cost, right? So there's a proposal in front of you, for the work that we had planned on proceeding with, which was the 9,200 plus a 10% markup. So that number was 10,175 that we would need to authorize, and we would spend only the 5,800 that's already been incurred to date. The second thing that I'd like to propose that the committee does is that there are periodic costs over the course of the job that will come up, and
Hang on, can we do one?
Yeah, let's do one at a time.
I know what you're doing next, so
Yeah.
we do one at a time.
Do one at a time.
So I guess my question is, so why, if we're only paying for the sunk cost, why are we authorizing the 10,000?
you can authorize a number less than that, but the back of the envelope math over a phone call is 5,800. I don't know if that's 5,900 or 6,200 or, so if you wanna offer like 7,000 or 8,000 or something that gives me a little bit of buffer. He was talking to the guy who's still getting all his receipts entered into the system. He's saying today, he thinks that was his sunk cost, but that 5,800 could have been a different number.
Could we authorize the proposal and authorize to pay costs incurred to date?
I think
Yeah, that's fine.
they're separate issues, so you can authorize the proposal. I think that's the vote that we're looking for today. When the invoice comes in, based on the feedback that we've gotten from the members of the committee we've spoken to, we'll ask him to issue us an invoice based on his cost to date, and that'll come in your invoice package in the future and be authorized at that time. And it'll only be, I've asked him to stop work as of this afternoon,
Okay.
and so I don't expect him to incur additional costs
hold
unless
on.
we authorize him to move
I
forward.
have a question on that, cause there is a pile of riprap over there.
That would be the other, that would be the other piece
not.
that we would,
I don't need a pile of riprap.
that would be the other piece that the higher authorization would give us.
So either remove that or finish putting it out there?
Just put it in the first
Yeah,
50
drop-
feet of
just
it.
push it
So there may be, so in that case, like, there may be some additional
Yeah.
work.
Right.
Okay,
So we should authorize the 10,175, and then we will only invoice you for whatever's spent today, plus whatever Tim needs us to do to clean up our mess.
okay. Is there comfort with that
Yeah.
amongst the committee?
Yeah, it's fair. They're only gonna spend as much as we need.
Yep.
so.
Okay. So I would seek a motion to approve the proposal from WJ Diana Backhoe Services.
So you're gonna run it through us, just,
Oh. So
In order to move it forward
order to
from a
move it forward,
procurement
because-
standpoint,
what's
Vertex.
my motion here?
motion to approve Vertex, to authorize the services for the temporary road for a not to exceed number of $10,175.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mike.
Not to
second-
exceed is
Second, yeah, not to
Good.
exceed, yep. Motion by Mike, second by Nancy, roll call vote, Jagrut,
Yes.
Tiffany,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes, sir.
Nancy,
Yes.
Bill? hopefully.
I wonder if Bill
Oh.
is,
Did we lose the?
did we lose the Zoom?
He is having a sound problem. He has just indicated that he's voting yes.
Hold on.
Not 100% sure that's.
How do you vote,
How about
Bill?
you just give a thumb,
Give me a
Bill?
thumbs up.
Give a thumbs up. Yes, no?
Oh, we heard that, we heard that, okay. And I am a yes,
I
so
turned him off
it
when
is
Ashley had it on.
unanimous,
Once over.
But I think we have Chris.
6, and so passes. Now let's talk about the second.
Chris, mute your mic.
So,
I think I am muted.
Okay, so the second statement was a natural part of our moving forward with the project. Now that we've moved into design development, there are other types of ancillary costs that will just come up over the course of the project. And so we always recommend that the committee authorize a number that you guys are comfortable with, that the chair can authorize in between meetings, and then at your next meeting, we would report back to you on what that would be. This was a case of, with the road, where something like that would come up. There's a few other things that are coming up with MIPA related to flyers and mailers and things like that would probably fit within that same type of authorization of a few $100,000 or a few $1,000s for mailers and printing and all that would come with it. So, I would recommend that the committee come up with a number that you're comfortable with, that you can authorize John as the chair to approve in the in between meetings. And
Do you have a recommended number?
yeah, I mean, you never know what costs come up over the course of the job, so we always like to recommend 25,000 for the design phase, and then as we go into construction, we would talk again, because that's when the dollars really go up with change order values and unforeseen conditions at that phase, and so a higher value would be needed for the construction phase.
We did this on Marathon, and what it does is it expedites the process a little bit, rather than have to wait for scheduled meetings. Question is, you just have to, Marathon, they trusted me, we have to trust John, absolutely trust you.
Well, I think, either waiting for the meeting or trying to scramble together a Zoom meeting, which we had to do a couple of times to authorize something, things are gonna come up a little bit more frequently, so.
I didn't mean to slight Mike, he is correct, he was the liaison on the other project. And certainly anybody that has the availability to be in tune with the project is the appropriate person.
As long as you don't want any more dishwashers, we're fine.
You're never gonna let that go, are you?
You remember that?
I certainly remember
God, that
it.
was awful. That was awful. All right, moving right along.
Anyone have any other questions, concerns?
Do we need a motion to authorize you to be able to do that?
You want to do a motion, because we're gonna get to the permitting update where we are gonna have to put out mailers and things like that, so
Yeah.
just miscellaneous expenses.
So a motion to authorize the
John.
chair to approve any expenses incurred up to $25,000.
Between meetings?
Yeah,
Between, yeah.
between meetings.
Report back
And
at your
report,
next
and
meeting.
report back to the committee on any, yeah.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second?
Motion by Mike, second by Tiffany. Roll call, Jagrut,
Yes.
Tiffany,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes, sir.
Nancy,
yes.
Bill,
Yes.
and I am a yes, so that is
Keep in mind,
unanimous.
we'll fry your butt if you screw up.
Yeah, no, I'm well aware. I will not be buying
Just
any
so you know.
dishwashers, just so, yeah. No dishwashers in this building.
I got a deal for you, John.
All right, Chris, do you want to give the permitting update?
So just a miscellaneous update before we get into permitting. We have a number of meetings upcoming. I included this version of our DD work plan in the email that I sent out with your meeting packet. Some of the key upcoming items are Perkins is going to begin some concept development meetings. There's a select group of teachers and principals at Elmwood that they're going to meet with to discuss how the concept can tie to the curriculum and the overall theming of the building. So those will kick off next week. We'll also be entering into another round of focus groups, as I mentioned earlier, that we expect to be late February or early March. And we are expecting that we're also going to be having a sustainable and integrated design meeting for both the building and the site. It's a chance for the design team to come together along with invitees from the town to discuss the sustainability of the building and how to integrate those, or best integrate those sustainable attributes into both the site and the building. So that scheduling is also coming up. The big permitting milestones that we know that are coming up as part of the MIPA process, community outreach is necessary. We've discussed that in the past. We're currently developing a way in which to reach out to the community, likely through a direct mailer, to the specific environmental justice community that's identified by MIPA themselves. We're looking at scheduling a meeting in a community forum style in that community, similar to what was done during design. That's, we would recommend sometime around March 11th. And so we'll be working towards that goal. As part of that, we'll try and collect information specifically from that community, which is something that MIPA has specifically asked us for, and moving that forward. From the timeline that we've been given, we believe that we'll be submitting to MIPA around the end of April. And while there's multiple submissions and periods involved in that, the best comprehensive estimate we have is that it's a 9-month process. And so that 9-month process would likely conclude in January, February of 2025. And Jeff, I don't know if you wanted to take the other point.
Sure, so, as part of your, essentially 2 hours ago, an email, the MSBA's response to me on Friday.
Hang on, sorry, I'm gonna stop you again.
Yep.
I keep doing that to Jeff tonight.
It's okay.
I just want to, again, I think it's a
Fantastic
change of
time.
subject, so
Yeah.
let's stop on schedule and permitting and see if there are any questions related to that.
So that environmental justice is the community engagement Chris talked about, so that will have follow-on and we will report out, but you gave the filing date was the end of April, right?
Yep,
You talked about
April
that.
30th, and then that kicks off a 9-month, estimated 9 months.
Right, which depends on the frequency of comments and things that we have to address back from the state agencies, because all state agencies are able to comment on the ENF, environmental notification form, and we will address any comments that come back.
I would also note when it comes to the permitting process, so as everybody's aware, we started some initial surveying on Hayden Row. I did hear from a couple of the abutters. We did notify. Absolutely fine, just sort of kind of it, now that we're in January and February, just wanted to know what the timeline was again along the permitting process, and so I gave them a high-level update of where we are. But obviously, we're gonna, we're doing our best to try to stay engaged with the group along Hayden Row.
Can I ask a question on the MIPA forums? Do we have to get a quorum of the invitees or anything? Is there any stipulation? Okay.
Just outreach to the area in question, to that community.
Okay.
They encourage you to reach out to any community-based organizations. I know John's trying to reach out to I don't know the official name of the South Asian.
Yeah,
community.
South Asian,
Circle of
South
Hopkinton.
Asian Circle of Hopkinton, yep.
And so they like to see that community engagement with existing organizations, but also engagement. Really, the way they describe it is anything you can do to solicit the feedback of a community that may otherwise be marginalized.
Yeah, and so I guess it's more specific, but in some ways it's a lot like the MSBA process where we have to provide them with all of the public examples of public outreach we've done, where it's, we need to show that the committee has made the best possible effort they can. It's not, if people don't show up, we don't have to go door to door.
Yeah, they have a few extra things, like if you go door to door, they'll like that. If you end up with having a meeting, take attendance so they know where the folks came from. If you're gonna solicit feedback, try and get some information from the folks making the comments so that you can verify that they are part of the community and they're not just someone from the other side of town showed up at the meeting and shared all of his thoughts. So the sort of best practices that they put out there, but really, there's a group that's identified based on the fact that they are, I get the percentage wrong,
Just
65%
identified. I mean,
minority.
most of Ashland is now also in this environmental justice, so it's the part that it abuts Ashland and beyond. And so, it's a newer requirement in terms of people addressing it, and so I think, they just wanna see our due diligence and that we've reached out to these groups in town.
And then one other thing that I noticed on this schedule you sent out, so it looks like the next submission we have due to the MSBA is late March.
Yeah, design
And that-
development,
and
yeah,
that's just-
so our
okay.
next, yeah.
So and that's something that I assume the committee will have to review and approve.
Yes, yeah, so you'll,
They do, yeah.
but yeah, so typically we'll issue the drawing set, which will be a culmination of the stuff you guys have been seeing at these various design presentations. That'll go out for estimating and drawing review comments. And then we'll come back to present to you that we're in fact on budget, or plus or minus, whatever that number is, for feedback. And then you guys will approve us to then submit it, and we'll put that package forward once you're satisfied.
Okay, great. Any other questions?
So that process of permitting will happen concurrent to the local permitting process, which will kick off after we get through that design development set. And so in April, we're gonna then start to submit with all the local permitting.
All right, talk about cash flow.
Cash flow, you know, the MSBA issued the project scope and budget agreement, which if you recall is the first of two agreements. You know, essentially the PSBA is essentially a purchase and sale, which is the terms of the deal. And then the project funding agreement is actually more like your bank note, where you then say, we're gonna release the payments to you on a monthly basis. So we signed the first one, we returned that for you, we asked when we were getting a copy of the second agreement, and they pointed us to a clause in the first agreement that says, because we're subject to MEPA, we have to complete the MEPA process before they release the second document for you guys to sign. Which net means that we're not getting reimbursed on a monthly basis, that the town is going to have to pay until we complete MEPA, which is essentially, you know, 14 months after you funded the project, so 9 more months from when we do submit, which essentially puts us to around March, April of next year. So you'll pay all invoices between that time, and then we'll sign the agreement, the town will, and then you'll submit for back pay. So essentially, if you look at our cash flow, which I included in your packet, is about $10 million you're gonna spend over the next year and a half. You'll pay the full 10 million, and then you'll get 4 million back from the state once the agreement is signed.
Which is what we would have got.
Which is what you're getting anyway.
Right.
The difference is the short-term borrowing has to increase, so we have to get with the town leadership to increase the borrowing that's already been.
So it just seems to me that the treasurer has to know this new thing, so that he can borrow money. And there's no extra cost to the town, it's just, yeah, great.
Yeah, no, the headline is, this is no impact whatsoever
Yeah.
on reimbursement.
Yeah.
This is about cash flow and timing of reimbursement.
Just the MSBA helping us.
Any other questions about that? So, you'll get in touch with, like, Norman's office and figure that out?
Yeah.
Or do you need me to do anything on that?
No, if you want me to do it, we can do it. So we can reach out to Norman's office and the treasurer. They'd already asked for a confirmation of the cash flow, which we had been updating anyway in the midst of this, so we will send that along with the other update.
Okay, yeah, just let me know if you need anything. Anything else? I think that's our agenda, right?
That was our agenda for tonight.
You told me it was gonna be a long meeting.
I thought it was gonna be long.
You said 8 at the beginning.
You guys are efficient.
It's longer than 10 minutes.
It's true. It's definitely much longer than our shortest meeting. Okay, does anyone else have any questions or any other business? Okay, I think Bill might have left, but he's still on the Zoom.
He's still on the Zoom.
So we're gonna
He just
do-
unmuted,
Oh, he
so
just
he's gotta be
unmuted,
there.
okay. So, at this point, I would seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Mike, second.
Second?
Second by Jagroot. So roll call vote. Jagroot?
Yes.
Tiffany?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes, sir.
Nancy?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
And I am a yes. So it is unanimous, and we are adjourned at, we'll round to 7:17 PM. Thank you to HCAM. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.